Hello everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to have a look at my personal two favourite trade setups in MTPredictor, the VS or volume spike and the Wave 3 or W3 trade setup, where we had a couple of great examples that unfolded on the ES yesterday. But as usual, let's start with our risk disclaimer and remind you that all examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. No trades are actually taken, they're just shown for illustration and training purposes only. Remind you there's a risk of loss in trading and investing. I'll put this another way, all professional traders know and understand, but more importantly accept that losses can and will and do unfold. Losses are an important part of any professional trading approach, so there always will be losing trades. Right, let's have a look at these two setups on the 3-minute chart of the ES, which was the 23rd of May. Let's start by looking at the VS or the volume spike setup, which as you can see nailed the very bar of the low of the day yesterday. I'll just take that 15-minute DP support out of the way there, and I just want to use our training mode to jump back to here. So what is a VS setup? A VS setup is where a bar makes a wide range move, like it did here, a wide range move through a previous high or low. So if I put a low tag on here, you can see that the ES made a new low. It made this on a high volume spike. In other words, the volume spiked as the market went through this level. Most normal or most amateur traders would view this as selling, a break to new lows on high volume as selling. However, at MTPredictor, what we do is put a decision point support level on here, and you can see that there's potential support at this level. Now what happens the next bar is the important thing. If I go forward one bar after that, you can see the market failed to follow through. In other words, the market did not carry on down, so therefore the high volume on the previous bar was not selling, as most amateurs would think, is actually buying. In other words, the professionals were stepping in and doing what's called a classic fake out. If I right mouse click now and do the analysis on, this gives us a potential trade setup. Again, we use position sizing to keep our initial risk small and under control, so when the losing trades come through, and they always will, the losses were kept small, and as you can see we have a profit target up here for a potential 3.5 hour profit. Let's see what the market did. If I turn training mode off, you can see that that actually nailed the very low of the day, or the very bar of the low of the day, and the market rallied quite nicely up to the first profit target here, where a potential profit of approximately 3.5 hours was available. If you decide to run this a bit further using our ATR stop, you could have held into close for a potential 5.8 hour profit. But the reason I like these volume spike or VS setups is because they are in the direction of the professional money, so they normally have nice strong moves coming off the back of them as the professionals basically fake out the amateurs and move the market in the opposite direction sharply. And as you can see, that actually nailed the very bar of the low of the day yesterday. So that's my first favorite trade setup. The other one, if I clear everything off, is a Wave 3 or W3 trade setup. So what is this? Well, in Elliott wave terms, this is a Wave 2, and if I put the major waves on, you can see that what we're looking at is an initial rally, wave 1 or A, an initial correction, wave 2 or B, and if I right mouse click here and do Elliott wave minor, you can see that the wave 2 or B subdivides into a minor A, B, C. So now we need to decide whether this is a wave 2 or a wave B. How we do this is we go back and look at the start of the sequence, which is here, and we see whether the start of the sequence was coming in at higher time frame support or resistance. In other words, this is where we use our isolation approach to Elliott wave, knowing that markets are random about half the time and have a clear pattern about half the time. So we only use Elliott wave patterns in isolation, but only when the market is making a meaningful support or resistance or meaningful move of higher time frame DP support and resistance, which you can see is what it did here. So this higher time frame DP support was on the chart in advance before today even opened, and as you can see that came in and nailed the low of the day as well. So what does this mean? Well, what it means is we now start here, so therefore the initial move off an important low would actually be a wave 1. The initial correction here, if I clear everything off, I'll just put that ABC back on again. The initial correction here would be a wave 2. We're then looking for a strong wave 3 kind of swing. If I right mouse click and do Elliott wave major, you can see that that's exactly what unfolded, with the market moving up strongly in a wave 3 swing. So in other words, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for the initial move up, wave 1, ABC correction down into a potential wave 2, to then have a strong wave 3 swing. Why do I like this? Well, if I take everything off and I right mouse click here and do our analysis, you can see that the potential profit as the market went up into this typical wave 3 WPT was 5 times the initial risk. This is why I like these trade setups, is because the wave 3 is typically the strongest and longest in a completed 5-wave sequence, and therefore has the largest potential profit in relation to the smallest initial risk. So when you're wrong, the losses are kept small at 1R, but when you're right, hopefully the profits are large, but large not just in dollars, but large in relation to the initial risks. And as you can see, this is exactly what the market did. It actually went up into that typical wave 3 WPT. The MTP trend was strong, in other words, beyond its strength band. She may well have decided to run with the ATR stop up into the close for a little bit more profit. But even if you hadn't, and you'd come out at that level, then that would have been a nice 5.2R profit. And you can see that was all set up because we had our 15-minute DP support on our chart in advance that basically nailed the low of the day there. So that allowed you to determine the large trend was up. You can see our MTP trend indicator confirmed this, whereas the previous red downtrend turned to black here as the market came into support, then turned blue as the market started to rally up. There was a sell setup here a bit earlier in the day, but this was probably a higher risk setup because it didn't seem to fit in with our larger degree trend, because the MTP trend indicator was black and we weren't coming off any large degree support and resistance. But if you had have taken this, then it would have been a losing trade. Remember, I said at the start that losses can and do and will unfold when you're trading, but the trick is keeping the loss small. So this would have been a -1R loss. But the purpose of today's video was to show you the two favorite trade setups of mine. And here on the ES yesterday, both of them unfolded absolutely perfectly, where we had a VS buy setup here that nailed the very low of the day, or the very bar of the low of the day, and would have produced a nice 3.5R profit. Or if you decided against that one, this TS1 W3 trade setup here, if I post the analysis on, would have potentially had a 5R profit. There was a history triangle here, but you wouldn't have been considered this because it was against a blue MTP trend and against an otherwise uptrend off our 15-minute DP support zone. So a good example of the VS and the W3 or wave 3 trade setup. On the other market, it's also a good day as well. You can see there's the 15-minute DP nailing the low of the day on the NQ. Therefore, the long trades were the ones to consider. And we also had a nice VS setup there, although it wasn't quite as good as the one on the ES because that wasn't coming off a failure of a major or important high or low. The YM was also good as well, where we had a DP buy coming in here as our MTP trend went grey, but more importantly it was coming in at higher time frame support and resistance. And here you can see this is exactly what unfolded, with the market coming down to the higher time frame support that nailed the low, and the market direction changed after that. But the whole purpose of this video really was to look at the two examples of my two favourite trade setups that both unfolded on the ES yesterday, the VS or volume spike setup here, and then the W3 or wave 3 trade setup here, both of which would have produced some very nice profitable trades.